The alarm sounded across Kepler Station at exactly 1447 Galactic Standard Time. Ambassador Jakara dropped the datapad she was holding and stared at her assistant. "What system?" she asked. "Sol," her assistant replied, his voice shaking. "It's from the Sol system." Jakara felt her heart skip a beat. The Sol system. Earth. Humanity. They had been silent for 847 years. Every species in the galaxy knew the story. Humans had just started traveling to other stars when they suddenly stopped responding to all messages. Their colonies went dark. Their homeworld went quiet. Ships sent to investigate found empty cities, abandoned stations, but no bodies. No signs of war or disease. Just silence. The galaxy had moved on. Human buildings became museums. Their technology was studied and copied. Children learned about the mysterious disappeared species in school. And now, after all this time, there was a signal. Gara ran to the communications center. Dozens of operators were already working, their screens filled with data. The head of communications, a tall Brevix named Korthong, turned to face her. "It's a ship," he said. "One vessel. They're requesting permission to dock." "What's the ship's name?" Jakara asked. Korthon checked his screen. "They call it the Odyssey's End." Jakara made her decision quickly. "Grant them permission. Dock them at Bay 7. I want security there, but tell them to stay calm. Get medical teams ready, and someone contact the Galactic Council immediately." The next 2 hours felt like days. Jakara assembled a reception team. She picked diplomats from 6 different species, all trained in first contact situations. Even though humans weren't exactly new to the galaxy, this felt like a first contact. Who knew what they had become after so many years? Security teams positioned themselves carefully around Dock Bay 7. Medical scanners were set up. Translators prepared their equipment, even though humans spoke several languages that were already in the galactic database. News reporters from every major network tried to get into the station, but Zhao Shakara ordered them kept away, at least for now. The ship appeared on the view screen as it approached. It was small, designed for maybe 20 people at most. The design was clearly human, but it looked new, not like something that had been traveling for centuries. The hull was smooth and dark, strange markings that didn't match any human writing system in the records. The ship docked perfectly. Jakata watched the connection seal engage. She stood with her reception team in the docking bay, her formal robes feeling too tight. Beside her, a Kelvin priest whispered a prayer for a peaceful meeting. A Thra scientist kept checking her scanner, looking nervous. The airlock door hissed. Jakara held her breath. The door opened, and humans stepped through. There were 12 of them. They wore simple gray uniforms without any military markings. They moved with an odd grace, as if walking required careful thought. Their faces were calm, almost too calm. They looked human enough to arms, 2 legs, hair, eyes of different colors. But something about them felt different in a way Zia Chikara couldn't name. The woman in front smiled. It was a gentle smile, but it made Zetakara uncomfortable. It was the smile of someone who knew secrets. "Hello," the woman said in perfect galactic common. "My name is Sarah Chen. Thank you for allowing us to dock." Gara stepped forward. "I am Ambassador Z, Achika of the Velen Collective, representing the Galactic Council. On behalf of the galaxy, I welcome you. We have many questions." "I'm sure you do," Sarah said. "We have many answers." "May we come aboard your station?" Of course, Jakara said. She noticed that Sarah hadn't asked about Earth, about what happened to humanity's buildings and colonies. It was as if she already knew. The humans followed Sarah to a conference room. They moved as a group, silent and coordinated. The medical scanners showed they were biological, not robots or holograms. Their heart rates were slow and steady. To steady. No one was nervous or excited, not even a little. In the conference room, Jakara offered them seats. The humans sat down, still silent, except for Sarah. "Before you ask your questions," Sarah said, "let me tell you why we're here. We brought something back. Information, stories, experiences, data. Archives that contain knowledge your scientists will need centuries to fully understand. One of the humans opened a case and pulled out a small device. It looked like a standard data storage unit, but it hummed with energy that made the room's lights flicker. "This is just the first archive," Sarah continued. "We have dozens more on our ship. But before we share them, you need to understand something. We didn't leave the galaxy. We didn't run away or die. We evolved. We went somewhere the physical body cannot go." HFY leaned forward. "Where did you go?" Sarah's smile grew wider. "Inward. We went inward, deeper than flesh and bone. We discovered that consciousness doesn't need a body. It can exist in places between places, in the spaces where reality bends." The Thros scientist spoke up. "That's impossible. Consciousness requires a physical substrate. Neurons, quantum processors, something material." "We thought that too," Sarah said. "We were wrong. And we spent the last 847 years proving it." Jakara felt cold despite the warm room. "You're saying all of humanity left their bodies behind?" "Most of us, yes," Sarah said. "Billions of minds freed from physical limits. We experienced things no flesh-based being could survive. We lived for what felt like millions of years in what was only moments in your time. We saw other universes, met other minds, learned truths about reality that will change everything you think you know." The room was silent. Finally, Jakara found her voice. "Why did you come back?" Sarah's expression changed. For the first time, Shakara saw something like concern in her eyes. "Because we found something out there," Sarah said quietly. "Something that all physical beings need to know about. Something coming this way." She placed her hand on the data archive. "But first," she said, "we need to show you where we've been. We need to share our stories. Because without understanding what we experienced, you'll never believe what we have to say about what's coming." Kata looked at the small device on the table. Inside it was knowledge from beyond the physical world. Stories from places that shouldn't exist. And somewhere in those archives was a warning. She reached out and took the device. "Show us," she said. Sarah nodded. "Prepare yourselves. What you're about to learn will change the galaxy forever." The Galactic Council chamber was completely full for the first time in 60 years. Representatives from 300 worlds sat in curved rows, all facing the center stage where Sarah Chen stood alone. News feeds broadcast to billions of beings across the galaxy. Everyone wanted to hear what humanity had to say. Jakara watched from her seat in the front row. 3 days had passed since the humans docked at Kepler Station. 3 days of medical tests, security checks, and endless preliminary meetings. The humans were patient through it all. Too patient. They answered every question with calm precision, never getting tired or frustrated. Sarah wore the same simple gray uniform. She carried nothing except a small projection device. The lights in the chamber dimmed, and she began to speak. "In the year 2347 by Earth's calendar," Sarah said, "a scientist named James Morrison made a discovery. He was studying consciousness, trying to understand how the brain creates awareness. He believed that thoughts were more than just electrical signals and neurons. He believed consciousness was something fundamental, like gravity or light." A holographic image appeared above Sarah's head. It showed an old human man with gray hair, working in a laboratory filled with strange equipment. "Dr. Morrison built a machine," Sarah continued. "It could scan a person's entire brain, every neural connection, every memory, every pattern of thought. But instead of storing this information in a computer, his machine did something else. It transferred the consciousness itself into what he called a quantum substrate." The Thros scientist who had been at the docking bay stood up. "What exactly is a quantum substrate?" Sarah smiled. "Think of reality as having layers. Physical matter is the top layer, the one you can see and touch. But underneath, there are other layers. Quantum fields, probability waves. Mathematical structures that define the rules of physics. Dr. Morrison found a way to exist in those deeper layers." "That's nonsense," someone shouted from the back rows. "You can't exist as mathematics." "Can't you?" Sarah asked. "What are you made of?" "Atoms." What are atoms made of? Quantum particles. What are those made of? Energy and probability. Go deep enough, and everything is just information. Just patterns. Dr. Morrison found a way to preserve the pattern of consciousness without needing a physical brain to hold it. She touched her projection device. The image changed. It showed a person lying in a large machine. Then the person's body going still while something invisible seemed to lift away from it. The first successful transfer happened on March 15, 2347, Sarah said. Dr. Morrison himself was the test subject. His body stopped breathing. His heart stopped beating. But his consciousness didn't die. It existed in the quantum substrate, thinking, feeling, aware. He could interact with computers, send messages, prove he was still himself. But he was dead, a Kelvin delegate said. A ghost in a machine. No, Sarah said firmly. Death is the end of consciousness. Dr. Morrison's consciousness never ended. It just changed location. Think of it like moving from one house to another. You're still you, just in a different place. Gosh. Jakara raised her hand. What happened next? Sarah's expression became distant, as if remembering something from long ago. Word spread. At first, people were terrified. Religious groups said it was unnatural. Governments tried to ban the technology. But Dr. Morrison kept talking to the world from his quantum existence. He described what he experienced. He said it was beautiful beyond words. He said physical life was like living in a tiny room when there was an infinite mansion waiting outside. The hologram showed crowds of humans gathering around Morrison's laboratory. Some held signs of protest. Others held signs begging to be transferred. Within 5 years, the technology improved, Sarah said. It became safer, more reliable. People started volunteering. Sick people who didn't want to die. Old people who wanted to keep experiencing existence. Curious people who wanted to explore. One by one, then by the hundreds, then by the thousands, humans began to transfer. What about the ones who stayed? Shishikara asked. What about the physical humans? They had a choice, Sarah said. Everyone did. About 30% of humanity chose to stay physical. They kept civilization running, took care of Earth and the colonies, but the majority chose to transfer. By 2380, over 5 billion human consciousnesses existed in the quantum substrate. The image changed again. It showed Earth from space, but something was different. Strange lights flickered around the planet, like aurora but in impossible colors. The quantum substrate exists everywhere, Sarah explained. But we built special facilities to make it easier to interact with the physical world. Quantum servers, we called them. They let us communicate with physical humans, help them, guide them. Earth became a bridge between two types of existence. Brevik's military commander stood. This doesn't explain the silence. If you were still there, why did you stop communicating with the rest of the galaxy? Sarah was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. We discovered something, she said. Once you exist in the quantum substrate, time works differently. A second in the physical world can feel like ours, days or years in quantum space. We could experience entire lifetimes in what you would call a moment. She paused, letting that sink in. We got distracted, she continued. The quantum realm is infinite. There are places to explore, things to experience that physical beings can't imagine. We could visit other layers of reality, places where the laws of physics were different. We could experience existence as pure thought, as pure energy. We forgot about the physical galaxy because we were busy living millions of subjective years of incredible experiences. So you abandoned us, someone said bitterly. Yes, Sarah admitted. We did, and we're sorry. But we came back because we learned something important during those millions of years. Something the physical galaxy needs to know. Jakara felt her stomach tighten. The warning you mentioned. Sarah nodded. But you won't understand the warning unless you understand what we experienced. You need to see the recordings, feel what we felt. Otherwise, you'll think we're insane. She touched her device again. What I'm about to show you are sensory recordings from the quantum realm. They've been translated as much as possible into forms that physical brains can process. But I warn you, some of what you see may be disturbing or confusing. The lights went completely dark. Then the chamber filled with impossible images. Jakara saw colors that didn't exist. She heard sounds that were somehow visual. She felt emotions that had no names. The recording showed consciousness existing as a point of awareness in an endless void. Then, as a wave spreading across dimensions. Then, as a pattern of pure mathematics solving itself, she saw humans experiencing existence as stars, burning with nuclear fire for thousands of subjective years. She saw them becoming photons, riding light waves across universes. She saw them merging with each other, becoming group minds of thousands, then separating again into individuals. The recording lasted only 5 minutes. But when it ended, Jakara felt like she had lived for centuries. She looked around the chamber. Many delegates were crying. Others sat in stunned silence. A few had fainted. Sarah stood quietly, waiting for them to recover. Finally, the Kelvin priest spoke, his voice shaking. "How many lifetimes have you lived?" "I personally," Sarah asked. "Thousands. Maybe tens of thousands. Time is hard to count when you're not physical. Some humans have experienced millions of years. Others stayed in quantum space for just a few decades before choosing to return to physical form, like we did." "Why did you return?" Shishikara asked. "Why leave that incredible existence?" Sarah's face grew serious. "Because during our explorations, we found something. We met other consciousnesses in the quantum realm, beings from species that died out billions of years ago. Beings from the future, beings from other dimensions. And they all told us the same thing." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of as many delegates as she could. "They told us that physical universes die," she said. "Not from entropy, not from heat death. Something hunts them. Something vast and old that exists across multiple dimensions. It consumes physical reality, layer by layer. And it's coming here." The chamber erupted in shouting. Sarah waited for silence. "That's why we came back," she said. "To warn you, to help you, to share everything we learned so the physical galaxy has a chance to survive." "What do you need from us?" Sarah smiled sadly. "Trust, time, and courage. Because saving the galaxy means doing something very strange. It means teaching you to become like us." The weeks following Sarah's announcement were chaotic. Half the galaxy believed the humans, half thought they were insane or lying. Religious leaders debated whether consciousness transfer was salvation or sin. Scientists argued about the physics. Military leaders worried about threats and weapons. But Jay Skara focused on listening. The Galactic Council set up a special facility where humans could share their stories in detail. Every day a different human would speak about their experiences in the quantum realm. Jakara attended every session. On the 15th day, a Japanese woman named Dr. Yuki Tanaka took the stage. She looked young, maybe 30 years old, in physical appearance. But her eyes seemed ancient. "I want to tell you about the 70 lifetimes I spent as a photon," Yuki said. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Jakara leaned forward. "In the quantum substrate, consciousness can merge with other forms of existence," Yuki explained. "I chose to merge with a photon of light. I became light itself. And then I rode that light across a universe very different from this one." She activated a holographic display. It showed a cosmos where galaxies moved backward, where time flowed in reverse. "In this universe, time ran opposite to ours," Yuki said. "I watched stars unburn, gathering light back into themselves. I saw ancient civilizations being unborn, their ruins becoming shining cities before they faded into never having existed. I experienced 70 complete journeys across this universe, from edge to edge." A Thross scientist raised his hand. "How is this possible? How can consciousness merge with a photon?" Yuki smiled gently. "Because at the quantum level, consciousness and energy are the same thing. They're both information, both patterns. Think of it like water mixing with water. You can't tell where one drop ends and another begins."
"Ow! What did you learn?"
Jashikara asked. I learned that time is not universal, Yuki said. Every universe has its own time, its own rules. I learned that experiencing existence as pure energy is peaceful in a way physical life can never be. And I learned that we're not alone in exploring these other realms. She changed the hologram. It showed shapes that hurt to look at, geometric forms that seemed to exist in too many dimensions. I met others while traveling as light, Yuki said. Consciousnesses from species I had never heard of. Some were exploring like me. Others had lived as energy for so long, they barely remembered being physical. They taught me how to navigate the quantum realm, how to find doorways between universes. For the next hour, Yuki shared mathematical equations she had learned from these other beings. The scientists in the audience frantically took notes. The equations solved problems that had stumped galactic researchers for centuries. When Yuki finished, another human took her place. Commander Marcus Webb was a tall man with dark skin and a calm voice. I want to tell you about the time I merged with a dying star, Marcus said. The audience gasped. Marcus nodded. I spent what felt like 3,000 years as a red giant star, he explained. I felt nuclear fusion happening in my core. I felt the pressure of gravity trying to crush me and the energy of fusion pushing back. When you're a star, these forces aren't just physics. They're emotions. Gravity feels like sadness, like the weight of existence. Fusion feels like joy, like the celebration of being alive. He showed recordings of his experience. The audience saw, through a star's perspective, feeling solar winds like breathing, feeling planets orbit like children playing nearby. The star was dying. Marcus continued, his voice heavy with memory. Its fuel was running out. I felt it getting weaker, felt the sadness of gravity starting to win. And as the star died, I died with it. But consciousness doesn't truly die in the quantum realm. I simply moved to a new form. What happened to you? Someone asked. I became part of the nebula, Marcus said. When the star exploded, I spread out across light years of space. I was clouds of gas and dust, slowly forming new stars, new planets. I experienced birth and death as the same thing. I understood that nothing truly ends. Everything just changes form. Kara felt tears on her face. She wasn't alone. The stories these humans told were more than information. They were spiritual experiences. Proof that existence was stranger and more beautiful than anyone had imagined. But the next story changed everything. A young woman named Amira Hassan stepped onto the stage. She looked nervous, the first human to show any real emotion during the presentations. My story is different, Amira said quietly, and it's disturbing. I spent time in a realm where thought creates reality, and I wasn't alone there. The room became very quiet. Imagine a place where thinking about something makes it real, Amira explained. If I thought about a mountain appeared. If I thought about an ocean, water filled the space around me. At first, it was wonderful. I created entire worlds just by imagining them. I lived in palaces I designed, explored landscapes I invented. She paused, and Jakara saw fear in her eyes. But after what felt like 1,000 years, I realized my creations were too detailed, Amira said. I would imagine a forest, and the trees would have types of bark I had never seen before. I would create a city, and the architecture would use engineering principles I didn't know. My own thoughts were adding information I didn't have. What was happening? Jakara asked. I wasn't alone, Amira whispered. There were other consciousnesses in that realm. They were influencing my creations, adding their own thoughts to mine. When I finally learned how to sense them directly, I found thousands of other beings, all creating and exploring together. She activated her display. It showed vast, complicated structures that seemed to be built from pure thought. Some of these beings were like me, Amira said. Physical species who had discovered consciousness transfer. I met beings from your galaxy, from other galaxies, even from times before this universe existed. We shared stories, taught each other, explored together. That sounds wonderful, the Kelvin priest said. Some of it was, Amira agreed. But some of the beings I encountered were not like us. They were vast, incomprehensible. They existed as pure concepts beings made of mathematics, or beings made of questions, or beings that were somehow alive contradictions. She changed the image. What appeared made several audience members scream. It was a shape that shouldn't exist, something that looked different depending on how you looked at it, something that seemed to be everything and nothing at the same time. "This is one of the incomprehensible ones," Amira said. "It communicated with me, though not in words. It showed me things, truths about the universe that I still don't fully understand. And it gave me gifts." "What kind of gifts?" a scientist asked nervously. Amira pulled out a data device. "Proof. Mathematical theorems that solve problems your scientists haven't even discovered yet. Languages that exist only as pure meaning without sounds or symbols. And warnings." She uploaded the data to the council's main computer. Screens throughout the chamber lit up with equations, diagrams, and symbols. Scientists began examining the data, their eyes growing wider with each passing moment. One Brevix mathematician started laughing and crying at the same time. "This is impossible," the mathematician said. "These equations prove things we thought were unprovable. This language expresses ideas we don't have words for. Where did this come from?" "From beings that exist beyond physical reality," Amira said. "Beings that have been watching the physical universe for longer than we can measure. And they all told me the same thing." She looked around the chamber. "They said that physical universes are fragile," Amira continued. "They exist in layers: matter, energy, space, time, all stacked on top of each other. But there's something that consumes these layers. They called it different names in different languages, but the meaning was always the same. The eater, the hunger, the end of layers." Gara felt cold. "What is it?" "An intelligence so vast it exists across multiple dimensions at once," Amira said. "It doesn't think the way we do. It doesn't want things the way we do. It simply consumes. It eats universes layer by layer, turning complex reality into simple nothing. And according to every being I talk to, it's coming here." "How do they know?" someone demanded. Amira touched her controls. The display showed something like a map, but in dimensions that made no sense. "This is a projection of multi-dimensional space. The blue areas are universes that still exist. The red areas are universes the entity has already consumed. Notice the pattern." The audience stared. Slowly, a terrible picture emerged. The red areas surrounded the blue areas. The entity was closing in from all directions. "Our galaxy is here," Amira said, pointing to a small blue spot. "The entity has already consumed the universes around us. We're in a pocket of survival, surrounded by nothing. And the beings in the quantum realm say we have maybe 5 years before it reaches us." Panic erupted in the chamber. Jakara had to bang her gavel repeatedly to restore order.
Ow.
"Is there any way to stop it?" she demanded. Amira nodded slowly. "Maybe the beings I met shared defensive strategies. Other civilizations have fought the entity before. Some succeeded in protecting their universes. Most failed. But every species that tried left their knowledge in the quantum realm, a library of everything they learned." She looked directly at Zia Chikara. "That's why we came back," Amira said. "Not just to warn you, but to help you access that library. To teach you how to enter the quantum realm safely. To give you the tools you need to fight back." The chamber was silent, except for quiet crying and whispered prayers. Finally, Jakara stood. "Show us," she said. "Show us how to access this library. Show us how to fight." Amira smiled sadly. "First, you have to be willing to leave your body behind." The galaxy split into 2 camps almost overnight. On one side were those who believed humanity's warnings and wanted to prepare for the threat. On the other side were those who thought the humans were lying, insane, or somehow compromised. Jakara sat in her office on Kepler Station, watching news feeds from across the galaxy. On one channel, a Velen priest spoke about salvation through consciousness transfer, calling it a gift from the universe. On another channel, a Krell general demanded the humans be arrested and their technology destroyed. "It's a trap," the general shouted on the screen. "They want us to abandon our bodies so they can take over our worlds." Think about it, 800 years of silence. Then they suddenly return with impossible stories and warnings about invisible threats. They're playing us for fools. Gara switched channels. A panel of scientists debated the mathematics that Amira had shared. Half said the equations were revolutionary. Half said they proved nothing about threats from other dimensions. Her door chimed. Sarah Chen entered, looking tired for the first time since arriving. They don't trust us, Sarah said, sitting down without being invited. I can't blame them. Our story does sound crazy. Part of me still thinks it might be, Zia Chikara admitted. No offense. Sarah laughed softly. None taken. I remember thinking Dr. Morrison was insane when he first announced his discovery. I thought consciousness transfer was impossible right up until the moment I did it myself. Tell me the truth, Chikara said, leaning forward. Are you still human? Is there anything of the original Sarah Chen left? Or are you something else wearing her memories? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. I don't know how to answer that, she finally said. I have all of Sarah Chen's memories from before the transfer. I remember my childhood, my family, my life, but I've also lived thousands of years in the quantum realm. I've experienced things Sarah Chen could never have imagined. Am I the same person? Philosophically, I'm not sure anyone can answer that. The Krell Empire's intelligence division says you might be carrying memetic hazards, Jakara said. Ideas that will infect our minds, change how we think. They're right, Sarah said calmly. Every idea is a memetic hazard in a way. Learning about consciousness transfer changed how humanity thought about existence. Learning about the threat will change how you think about survival. You can't encounter this information and stay the same. Gara felt a chill. That's not reassuring. It's not meant to be, Sarah replied. It's just the truth. But ask yourself this. As if we wanted to harm the galaxy, why would we come back at all? We were happy in the quantum realm. We could have stayed there forever, exploring and learning. We came back because we believe physical existence is worth preserving. Because we remember what it was like to have bodies, to eat food and feel sunlight and touch other beings. We don't want that to disappear. Before Jakara could respond, her communicator beeped urgently. It was Korthon from Communications. Ambassador, you need to see this, he said, his voice shaking. Minutes later, Jakara stood in the communications center with Sarah and a dozen other officials. The main screen showed a live feed from an astronomical observatory on the galaxy's outer rim. We detected an anomaly 3 hours ago, the observatory director explained via transmission. At first, we thought it was a sensor malfunction, but we've confirmed it with 17 different telescopes. Something is happening at the edge of the galaxy. The screen showed a region of space that looked wrong. Stars were disappearing, not exploding or dimming, just vanishing as if they had never existed. The effect was spreading slowly, but steadily. What are we looking at? Jakara demanded. Sarah stepped closer to the screen, her face pale. It's here. Earlier than we calculated? That's the entity beginning its approach. What exactly is happening to those stars? A scientist asked. They're being consumed, Sarah said. The entity eats physical reality layer by layer. First, it takes complex structures like planets and life. Then it takes the stars themselves. Then it takes space and time. Eventually, that entire region will be nothing, not even empty space. Just non-existence. The room erupted in panic. Gara had to shout to be heard. How long do we have? Sarah worked quickly on a nearby computer, running calculations. At this speed of approach, maybe 3 years before it reaches inhabited systems. Maybe less. 3 years. Someone screamed. You said we had 5 years? I said, maybe 5, Sarah replied. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Kara felt like the floor had dropped away beneath her. 3 years to save the galaxy. It was impossible. Over the next days, emergency sessions of the Galactic Council ran around the clock. Military leaders proposed building weapons, though no one could explain how to fight something that existed in multiple dimensions. Scientists proposed shields and barriers, but the mathematics showed nothing physical could block the entity. Through it all, Sarah and the other humans waited patiently. They offered their help. They offered their knowledge. They offered the only solution that might work. You have to enter the quantum realm, Sarah told the council. That's where the library is, the accumulated knowledge of every species that ever faced this threat. Physical beings can't access it. You need to transfer your consciousness. You're asking us to die, a Brevix delegate shouted. No, Sarah said firmly. Your body isn't you. Your consciousness is you. We're asking you to move, not to die. Protests erupted across the galaxy. On 12 worlds, riots broke out as citizens refused the idea of consciousness transfer. Religious groups held massive rallies, arguing that leaving the body was abandoning the soul. Political leaders worried about chaos if too many people transferred at once, but a few volunteered. Scientists who wanted to explore the quantum realm. Dying people who wanted to keep existing. Soldiers who saw it as their duty. And eventually, ambassadors who understood that someone had to take the risk. Kara stood in the transfer facility that the humans had built on Kepler Station. It was a large room with a single chair in the center, surrounded by equipment that hummed with quiet power. Sarah stood beside her. I'm scared, Kara admitted. You should be, Sarah said. This is the biggest decision you'll ever make. Once you transfer, you can come back to physical form if you want, but you'll never be able to forget what you experienced. You'll never be able to see reality the same way again. Tell me again why I'm doing this. It's because someone needs to access the library and verify our story, Sarah said. Because someone the council trusts needs to see the threat with their own eyes. Because the galaxy needs a leader who understands what we're facing. Gara sat in the chair. Technicians attached sensors to her head, her heart's, her primary nervous cluster. What will it feel like? She asked. Like falling asleep and waking up at the same time, Sarah said. Like being born again. Like coming home to a place you've never been. Doesn't make sense. Sarah smiled. It will soon. Gara closed her eyes. She heard the machine powering up, heard Sarah giving quiet instructions to the technicians. She felt her heart's beating fast, too fast. I'm activating the transfer in 3, Sarah said. 2. 1. The world disappeared. For a moment there was nothing. No light, no sound, no sensation. Kara tried to scream but had no mouth. She tried to move but had no body. Then she existed. She was awareness without form, thought without brain. She could sense everything and nothing at once. She was a point in infinite space, but also the space itself. Colors that had no names bloomed around her. Sounds that were somehow visible played across her consciousness. She felt emotions she had never experienced and couldn't name, and she wasn't alone. Sarah was there, a presence she recognized not by sight or sound, but by the pattern of her consciousness. And there were others, millions of them, billions of them. Human consciousnesses exploring the quantum realm, and beyond them, consciousnesses from species she had never heard of, beings from other times and other places. Welcome, Sarah's thought voice said. Now let me show you the library. Moved, though movement wasn't the right word. They shifted awareness, focusing on a different part of the infinite quantum realm. And there it was. The library wasn't a building or a computer. It was a collection of memories, experiences, and knowledge from every species that had ever discovered consciousness transfer. It was organized by thought, accessible by intention. Kara reached out with her awareness and touched the section about the entity. Knowledge flooded into her. She saw memories from beings who had fought the entity before. She experienced their battles, felt their fear, understood their strategies. Some had succeeded in driving it back. Others had failed and been consumed. All of them had left their stories behind, and she saw the entity. Itself through their memories, it was vast beyond comprehension. Existing in dimensions her physical brain could never have processed. It was hunger and void and ending made conscious. It didn't hate. It didn't want. It simply consumed because that was its nature. But it could be fought. It could be resisted. It could even be driven away, if enough beings worked together across both physical and quantum realms. Kara pulled her awareness back. She had seen enough. She had the proof she needed. Take me back, she told Sarah. Are you sure? There's so much more to experience here, I'm sure. The galaxy needs to know what I've seen. The transfer back to physical form was easier than the transfer out. Jakara opened her eyes in the chair, gasping for air. Her body felt heavy and slow, like wearing a suit of armor after swimming freely. Sarah helped her stand. What did you see? Jakara looked at her with new understanding. Everything. I saw everything, and I know what we have to do. Gakara stood before the Galactic Council 3 days after her consciousness transfer. She looked different now, moved differently. The other delegates noticed it immediately. She had the same calm, knowing look that the humans carried. I have experienced the quantum realm, she announced. I have accessed the library. I have seen the entity through the memories of species who fought it before. Everything the humans told us is true. The chamber erupted in noise. Chikara waited for silence. I propose we vote, she continued. Vote to trust humanity. Vote to begin preparing our defense. Vote to allow volunteers from every species to transfer their consciousness and access the knowledge we need to survive. The Krell general stood up, his massive frame shaking with anger. You've been compromised. They've infected your mind with their ideas. We can't trust anything you say now. You're right, Jakara said calmly. I have been changed by what I experienced. You can encounter the quantum realm and stay the same, but that doesn't mean I'm lying. Send your own representatives. Let them transfer and see for themselves. Let 100 delegates from 100 worlds experience what I experienced. Then we'll vote. The debate lasted for hours. Religious leaders argued about souls. Scientists argued about proof. Military leaders argued about security. But slowly, gradually, more delegates agreed to J. Kara's proposal. Over the next 2 weeks, volunteers from 70 different species underwent consciousness transfer. Each one came back changed, but each one confirmed the same truth. The library existed. The entity existed. The threat was real. Finally, the vote came. 300 worlds represented in the Galactic Council. 247 voted to trust humanity and begin preparations. 30 voted against. 23 abstained. J. Kara felt relief wash over her. It wasn't unanimous, but it was enough. The work began immediately. The humans helped build transfer facilities on major worlds across the galaxy. They trained technicians, taught scientists, shared every piece of knowledge they had about consciousness transfer and the quantum realm. Volunteers came forward by the millions. Some were scientists eager to explore. Some were soldiers ready to fight. Some were ordinary people who simply wanted to help save the galaxy. Not everyone chose to transfer. The 30% of humanity that had remained physical served as guides, helping other species understand what to expect. They organized support groups, answered questions, and helped people say goodbye to loved ones who chose to transfer permanently. J. Kara oversaw the effort from Kepler Station, which had become the center of the galaxy's defense preparations. She spent half her time physical and half her time in the quantum realm, coordinating between both forms of existence. 3 months after the vote, she attended a special presentation. Sarah had called together the leaders of the defense effort to share something important. They gathered in a large auditorium. Sarah stood at the center with a holographic display. We've made incredible progress, Sarah said. Millions of beings from dozens of species now exist in the quantum realm. They're accessing the library, learning strategies, preparing defenses. But there's something we haven't told you yet. Something we were waiting to share until we knew the galaxy was ready to hear it. Kara felt nervous. What is it? Sarah smiled. We're not the first species from this galaxy to discover consciousness transfer, and we're not the only ones preparing to fight the entity. The hologram changed, showing a map of the galaxy with dozens of points highlighted. These are locations where we've detected quantum signatures from other species, Sarah explained. Species that discovered consciousness transferred long before humans did. Some of them died out physically thousands of years ago, but their consciousnesses still exist in the quantum realm. A Thros scientist stood up. Are you saying there are ancient species still alive as pure consciousness? Not just ancient species from our galaxy, Sarah said. The quantum realm connects to other galaxies, Other times, other dimensions. Every species that ever discovered consciousness transfer can potentially communicate with every other species. We're all part of a vast network of minds spread across reality itself. She touched a control, and the hologram expanded to show not just their galaxy, but hundreds of galaxies, all connected by glowing lines. "This is the true library," Sarah said quietly. "Not just a collection of data, but a living network of billions of conscious beings who have been preparing for the entity's arrival. They've been watching, waiting, hoping that physical beings in threatened universes would discover consciousness transfer in time." Shkara felt tears forming. "How many beings are in this network?" "Trillions," Sarah said. "Maybe more. Every consciousness that ever transferred from any universe that ever existed, and they're all willing to help us." She gestured, and new images appeared. They showed beings of pure light working together to create structures in the quantum realm. They showed vast patterns of thought forming shields between dimensions. They showed defenses that existed in layers of reality physical beings could never see. "The entity is powerful," Sarah said, "but we're not powerless. United across physical and quantum existence, coordinated across species and time, we have a chance. A real chance." Kelvin Priest spoke up, her voice full of wonder. "This is what religious texts always promised. Unity of all consciousness. Heaven, or something like it," Sarah agreed. "Though it's not quite what anyone expected. It's not rest or peace. It's work, effort, struggle, but it's together." Over the next year, the defense preparations accelerated. Transfer facilities opened on every major world. Educational programs taught children about consciousness and existence. Artists created works celebrating both physical and quantum life. Not everyone was happy. Some species refused to participate. 3 worlds declared independence and closed their borders, determined to face whatever came with bodies intact. The galaxy respected their choice, though everyone feared for them. Jakarta transferred permanently after 8 months. Her physical body was old, wearing out. She chose to let it rest, while her consciousness continued working in the quantum realm. She missed physical sensations, sometimes the taste of food, the feel of sunlight, but she gained so much more in the quantum realm. She worked with beings from species that had died out millions of years ago. She learned defensive strategies from consciousnesses that had fought the entity across hundreds of universes. She helped organize the largest coordinated effort in history, spanning both physical and quantum existence. 2 years after humanity's return, the entity reached the first inhabited systems. Jakarta watched from the quantum realm as the entity began consuming the outer colonies. But this time, the galaxy was ready. Physical ships evacuated populations, while quantum consciousness carriers transferred beings who could exist in both realms worked to slow the entity's advance. They used strategies from the library, techniques learned from species that had succeeded before. The fight was slow and difficult. The entity was powerful, relentless, but for the first time in billions of years, it faced organized resistance from beings that understood its nature. Some battles were lost. Some worlds were consumed, but some worlds were saved. Some regions of space were successfully defended. The entity's advance slowed and stopped in certain areas. It was working. 5 years after humanity's return, Jakarta gathered with Sarah and representatives from the network for a status meeting. They existed as points of awareness in the quantum realm, communicating through thought, or holding the line, a consciousness from an ancient species reported. "The entity hasn't advanced past Sector 7 in 3 months. Physical populations are adjusting," another consciousness added. 70% of the galaxy now has transfer capability. "We can evacuate anyone who wants to leave physical form." Sarah's presence pulsed with cautious hope. "We might actually win this." "Win is the wrong word," Ziachikura said. "We can't destroy the entity, but we can drive it back, make it look for easier prey elsewhere. We can buy ourselves time, maybe centuries or millennia. And in that time, we can spread," Sarah said. "Teach other galaxies what we learned. Build the network larger." create defenses across all of physical reality. An ancient consciousness spoke, its thought voice carrying the weight of billions of years. This is what we've always hoped for. A universe where physical and quantum existence work together, where death is transformation, not ending, where all consciousness is connected across time and space. Jakara felt gratitude wash through her. We couldn't have done this without humanity. Without your warnings, your knowledge, your return. We didn't do it alone. Every species that ever discovered consciousness transfer contributed. Every being that chose to join the network made this possible. We're all in this together. Jakara shifted her awareness to observe the physical galaxy. From her quantum perspective, she could see it all at once. Billions of stars, trillions of beings, countless stories unfolding simultaneously. She saw humans and Valens and Krell and Thros and dozens of other species working side by side. She saw physical scientists developing new technologies while quantum consciousness worked to implement them. She saw children being taught about both forms of existence, growing up in a galaxy that understood reality more completely than ever before. And she saw the entity, vast and hungry, slowly being pushed back by beings it had never encountered before. Beings that refused to stay in one layer of reality. Beings that could fight in dimensions the entity thought were safe. It would be a long struggle, maybe endless. But for the first time, the galaxy had hope. Jakara turned her awareness back to the network meeting. "What's next?" she asked. Sarah's thought voice carried determination. "We keep fighting. We keep learning. We keep growing the network. And we never forget why we're doing this." "Why are we doing this?" a young consciousness asked, newly transferred. Jakar answered before Sarah could. "Because existence is precious, physical or quantum, flesh or thought. Every conscious being deserves the chance to experience reality. We fight because the universe is full of stories waiting to be told. And we're not going to let anything silence those stories." The network pulsed with agreement. Trillions of consciousnesses united in purpose. In the physical galaxy, humans and aliens work together at transfer facilities, helping new volunteers join the quantum realm. In the quantum realm, ancient beings and newly transferred minds studied the entity together, looking for weaknesses, and in between. In the spaces where reality bent and consciousness could exist in multiple forms at once, defenders held the line Sarah had been right all those years ago when humanity first discovered consciousness transfer. Physical life was like living in a tiny room when there was an infinite mansion waiting outside. But the humans had learned something else during their long exploration. The tiny room mattered. Physical existence, with all its limits and pain and temporary nature, was precious precisely because it was fragile. That's what the galaxy fought for now. Not just survival, but the right to exist in all the forms that consciousness could take. Physical and quantum. Limited and infinite. Temporary and eternal. Jakara looked at the galaxy through her quantum awareness and smiled without a face. Humanity had returned with stories beyond anything the galaxy imagined. And now, together, they were writing new stories. Stories of resistance and hope. Stories of unity across impossible divides. Stories that would echo through the quantum realm forever. The fight continued. The entity pressed forward. The defense held. And somewhere in the space between thought and matter, between physical and quantum, between what was and what could be, consciousness itself celebrated its own existence. The galaxy had learned to see beyond the limits of flesh, and in doing so, it had discovered something the entity could never understand, that the stories we tell, the connections we make, and the love we share across all forms of existence, these things cannot be consumed. They cannot be ended. They simply transform, moving from one reality to another. Forever part of the infinite pattern of conscious experience, humanity had gone exploring and brought back the truth. Existence was stranger, more beautiful, and more resilient than anyone had ever imagined. And together, United across every layer of reality, the galaxy would make sure that existence continued.